So when we talk about statistics, it's kind of important to drop back here and remember that statistics is ultimately an interpretive science. And sometimes that interpretation can color how things are represented. It can change how we want things to look if we want to present a certain perspective. For example, if we look at these three graphs here, we have that in our distribution and some nice clean representations just as numbers, but on either side, depending on how we scale our axes there, we get very different representations of that data, of those poverty rates, that we can make it look like they are increasing fairly sharply, or not very much at all, depending on how we choose to show them. For another example, what we're going to do is consider the following graphs, and we're going to think about how those graphs represent, or in other words, misrepresent the data that they're talking about. In our first case, we have that weird picture for the number of square feet in an average single-family home, where it's drawn using houses and shadows. There isn't really a clear vertical or horizontal axis for that problem, and they're just sort of there. It's creative. Creativity is nice, and it gives you a very striking picture, but it's not really clear what that thing's trying to say. And if you pay close attention, you'll see that on the bottom jumps from 10 to 20 years, so it's not consistent there. And also, based on the size of what we're looking at, you might think that the effect they're looking for got really, really big going from 1990 to 2010, but it was actually considerably smaller than from 1980 to 1990. So this thing looks kind of cool, but it really doesn't tell you much of anything. In the second case, we have that, the horizontal axis is much cleaner. It's not quite as creative as far as the graph goes, and it seems like the title there is doing most of the work. Because that vertical axis is just standards. It's a bit ominous. It sounds pretty intense. It certainly looks like it's supposed to get a reaction, but standards of what? Standards how? All that thing says is standards went down, but why? What are those standards that you're talking about going down? This is kind of a weird thing that's just sort of trying to make you feel something that they want you to. They want you to have a big reaction to this, to say, look at this. And yeah, maybe in context it could make a little more sense and be a little bit more fair, but in this case, it isn't. And it's not. And I would provide more for you if I thought this was worth something, but I don't. So I won't. The point here is you should understand that when it comes to finding this information, when it comes to being given this information, or when it comes to making it for yourself, it's important that things be presented in a way that is clear and honest, and not just in terms of being eye-catching or thought-provoking. And when you're seeing things like this, it's important to bear in mind that sometimes people do have a goal that they're trying to present. They're trying to make an argument using the numbers instead of using the numbers to make an argument. Going in one way is usually pretty fair. Going in the other can lead to some pretty ridiculous things.